So, welcome back to episode 2 of How to Be a Faster Driver. My name's Gavin Halls, this is Smoke and Still Garage, and today we're going to talk about how to keep a car balanced in a corner to get 100% of the performance. Let's get on with it. So, to start off, what is balance? We hear it a lot, you'll hear it a lot in real life when drivers are interviewed. You'll hear them often complaining that I couldn't find the correct balance in the car around a track. So what we're talking about then when we refer to balance is the way the car is handling the transitions. So there's typically two issues that arise with car balance, which are understeer and oversteer. So understeer is where we turn into a corner and the car, instead of turning, just wants to carry on going straight. And oversteer is basically either where we turn into the corner and the car suddenly wants to rotate even harder than we've turned, so the back end wants to slide round, or also on the exit of the corner, again, the car is trying to turn harder than we want to and trying to rotate around the front wheels. So both can happen on corner entry or corner exit, also mid-corner, and they can be influenced by things like braking, throttle application, and then just the forces of actually turning the car as well. So in a perfect world, in a perfect car, the balance we're looking for is actually a car that will have or will sustain a small amount of understeer and a small amount of oversteer around a perfect lap. The reason being, we don't predominantly want a car that does both, but we want a car that just does a tiny amount of both at the same time. That would be the perfect race car. So before we start getting into the intricacies of balance, we need to understand what the car is doing as we drive it around the track. Now, a car's balance is also affected by its mass and the way we move that mass as we drive the car around the track. Mass is the overall weight of the car and its movement, and how that movement affects the way the car is handling and coping with the track surface and the corners that we're asking it to go around. So the best way I can show you about how mass transfers in a car is my little tub here of water with a bit of food dye in it. So the tub represents, let's try and get it on here. So the tub represents a race car. So you've got the four corners of the tub representing the four corners of a race car, and then obviously the liquid is the mass in the middle. So when we're driving a car on track, a car will typically enters 4 transitional stages. So the first stage that we see the car in will be the balance stage. So the mass is balanced quite equally over all 4 corners of the wheel. The next stage we enter into is what we call the dive stage, so braking. When we're braking the car, obviously this is the front, this is the back, so we're braking the car will naturally tilt forward and push the mass to the front wheels. So, second phase we enter into is what we call the roll phase. So we're looking head on at the front of the car here. So we start off with the car quite equally balanced, and then as we turn, say we turn around the left-hand corner, what will happen is the car will roll, and the weight from the inside, the weight from the inside will roll to the outside wheels of the car. So the inside wheels are actually quite light, they're not being pushed into the ground as much, but all that weight is actually transferred or rolled over to the outside wheels to aid cornering. So the fourth phase we enter into is the acceleration phase, and this is where we apply the power, and what happens is as we apply the power we enter into acceleration, or what we term as the squat phase. So all the mass is pushed over towards the rear wheels of the car. This aids us on acceleration to get more grip over the rear wheels and drive us out of the corner. So now that we understand the 4 transitions that a car generally makes as it's driving around a racetrack, we need to begin looking into how quickly the car can change from each of those different transitional stages. And this is something I term as the frequency of the car. Now the frequency or the speed in which it can switch between the transitional stages is dictated by many things. The biggest factor that it takes frequency is the actual car that you're driving, so the style of the car. So typically a V8 supercar versus a single-seater. A V8 supercar will have a very low frequency. So if you imagine a low frequency line, the V8 supercar will switch between transitions very softly and slowly. If you look at a single-seater, the frequency of a single-seater will be very small and sharp. A single-seater will switch between transitional stages very fast, very quickly, very abruptly. The reason being is frequency is dictated by layout of the car. So say a rear engine car versus a mid engine car versus a front engine car. These will all have different variances of frequencies. And then you've got the car's actual mass. So a single seater is typically very light, 5, 6, 700 kilos versus a V8 supercar that can often be 4 times the weight of a single seater. So obviously with a V8 supercar, you've got a lot more mass to move around initially versus a single seater, which has got quite a low mass. Now other variables are ride height, suspension, tires, fuel load, track conditions. So if you look at a V8 supercar, obviously it's got a great deal of mass. It's also quite a high mass, so the ride height is quite high. The center of mass is quite high compared to a single seater. So this will affect the way the weight moves around the car. Whereas a single seater, they can be like 40 mil off the ground. They've obviously got a low central weight. They're nearly 50-50 weight balance, so the weight is spread evenly in the middle of the car between the 4 wheels. So typically with their low ride height, central weight, they've got a very snappy frequency compared to the V8 car. You can imagine it takes a long time for the V8 to move its weight round. They're often softly sprung as well, so they'll really roll around and shift the weight nice and smoothly but very slowly between the 4 wheels. So frequencies are very important, and the reason being we need to drive the car to its natural frequency. Now as I said, this can be dictated also by a lot of settings on the car. So you can be driving the same car week in, week out, but if you make adjustments to the car's settings or setup, you will often affect the frequency in which it can switch between the transitional stages. So things like shock absorber settings, roll bar settings, tire pressures all have an effect on the speed or the frequency in which the car can switch between its transitions. Fuel load will have an effect as well, and this presents a problem when we're racing a car, because as we're burning off fuel, obviously we're losing weight out of the car. We're also affecting the ride height. The car is actually getting the car's ride height is increasing as the race goes on. We've also got tyre wear to take into account as well. So the tyres generally start off quite good and then go off typically towards the end of the race, and these factors will all affect the frequency or the speed in which the car can switch between the transitional stages. Now the reason the frequency is so important is we need to drive the car to its natural frequency. Obviously that's a problem because, as I just mentioned, the car's frequency is going to change as a race goes on. But what happens is if we try and rush the car, so if we try and drive, push the frequency too hard above its natural state, then what we actually do is end up with a car that becomes a little bit unbalanced. So we're not moving the mass around the car smoothly. Forget my bowl of water. So what we're aiming to do, I'll try not to drop it over myself. What we're aiming to do, let's start with this. So if we say we're going from squat to dive, so if we do it at the natural frequency of this water in the bottle, you can see we keep the mass nice and smooth, the waters are nice and level as we switch between squat and dive. Now if we were to make it a bit more abrupt, you can see the mass is moving around and it's all messy, and it's switching. Not only is it we're going from squat to dive, but we're not keeping the mass nice and smooth as we do it. It's trying to move back to squat as we go, because we've upset the balance. We've gone too hard for the natural frequency of that water moving around in the tub. Now this works out the same in a race car. If we overdrive the car, if we try and rush its natural frequency, we're not getting that mass displaced nice and smoothly and equally, and keeping it where we need to throughout the given phase that we're in. So what does that leave us? Well, to get a nice smooth or to drive the car to its natural frequency, we need to drive as smoothly as we can, and we need to try and match the car's natural frequency and not try and bully it into the corner. You'll often hear me say in my videos, don't bully the car, be a ballerina. So how do we use balance and weight transfer to aid our driving and go faster? Well, the first rule, and it's like I said in video 1, it's all about being smooth. Driving fast is not necessarily about arms flailing and the car sideways and locking wheels under the brakes. It's normally the exact opposite. So we need to be nice and smooth with our inputs. We need to understand the car's frequency and try to match that perfectly with the speed of our inputs. So the way we input the steering, if we throw the steering, so the way we input the steering, so if we absolutely throw the car into the corner, often that means we've gone beyond the car's natural frequency to turn in. So it's natural frequency to move the mass, load up the suspension, load up the sidewall of the tyre, and then start to make the turn into the corner. If we feed the car in quite abruptly, but quite gently, trying to match its natural frequency, so the speed the mass is moving to the outside of the car, will get a lot more grip. And then what happens is the mass will move to our outside wheels, which is where we want it, because then all the weight's on the outside, pushing those tyres into the ground. We've compressed the suspension and the roll bars at the natural frequency of the car, so they're going to stay compressed, because if we compress them too quickly, if we try and push that frequency, what will happen is basically Newton's theory of relativity, that every action has an equal opposite reaction. So if we compress those shock absorbers and the tyre sidewall really hard, then what will normally happen is they'll actually bounce back. And they'll bounce back too quickly for us. So what we want to do is go into the corner, turn the car in nice and smoothly, get the mass to the outside wheels, get the car leaned over, and then it begins to turn and we can make the corner. And the same with the way we input our throttle and brake pedal as well. So with braking, we're not just going to smash the brake pedal down and fling the front of the car into the track, throw all the mass forward, because what will happen is if we throw the mass to the front of a car too hard, we'll overwork the shock absorbers, and basically they're going to fight back, so they're going to bounce back up just as quickly as we push them down, and then all the mass is going to start splashing around the car. Imagine a tub of water, all the water splashing around. We don't want that. We want to keep the mass nice and smooth, so we do quite an initial firm pressure on the brake pedal, and then just gently squeeze in harder and harder as we get more mass transferring to the front of the car. And then once we've got it all there, we want to try and keep it there. So we need to keep our brake pressure equal. We don't want to be on and off the brake pedal in a perfect world, because every time we come off the brake pedal, obviously the mass will start to move around in the car, and we're losing weight, losing grip over the front wheels. Same with the squat phase. So when we're accelerating out of the corner, if we just smash our foot down to the ground, the mass is just going to start wobbling around. Like imagine our tub of water, and mass is just wobbling around everywhere, and it's not going to where we need it to be. So what we need to do is in the squat phase, we apply the throttle quite gently but quite firmly, and keep the transition nice and smooth. So as we go from say 0% throttle up to 60-70%, try and make that a nice smooth sweeping arc, keeping the mass moving at a constant rate, and then just gently feed in the last part of the throttle to keep the weight in the back of the car over the wheels that are driving us out of the corner. Obviously, the more mass we have over the drive wheels or the turning wheels at any given phase in the corner gives us more grip, and that'll allow us to get out of the corners or get through the corners a lot faster. So, have I got any tips to help you try and drive smoothly around the track and get that transition speed correct for the car you're driving? Well, something I do with the students is I tell them to try and imagine that we're driving with a bottle of water up on the dashboard, and what we're aiming to do is to keep that water nice and balanced as we switch between our transitions in the given phase of the corner that we're in. So if you can imagine, it's really hard to do unless you've got a motion sim. I suppose you could do it, but if you've got a fixed sim, you just imagine you've got that bottle of water up there in sim world, and it's on the dashboard, and we're just trying to keep that water as smooth as we possibly can as we go in and out of the corners. So I hope that video helps. Obviously there's some more coming in the series. I'm just trying to get over the real basics first, help you guys to understand what we're trying to achieve in the car before we get into the intricacies of braking, turning, cornering the car, accelerating out the other end, and then obviously the really serious stuff, which is getting into racing lines and how we'd attack different corners on the track. So if you like this video, please do feel free to like and subscribe. If you've got any ideas for future videos that you'd like to see me attack, or any future topics you'd like to see me have a crack at and try and explain, please leave them in the comments down below, and I promise I'll try and do them. If not, we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.